Thank you, Bonnie, for coming here to the greenhouse. And a warm welcome to everyone. This is the third talk in the series that we're calling the Greenhouse Artist Talks. And it's an initiative by myself with on 2 feet. One being my curatorial practice, based in Malmö, and the other having another foot to leg into a research project here in Malmö at the Malmö University entitled the Living Archives Research Project, which I think if you know about. Together with Elisabeth, we are working on a specific strand which is broadly urban gardening, perhaps better urban sustainable development. Within that strand, within the larger project, we are conducting workshops with students and sort of learning a lot, the two of us, and what that relates, how that relates to within the theme of this research project and the other researchers. But the curatorial leg is perhaps, or it is a continuation of the work that I have been doing for quite a few years. Yeah, so just sort of situating it within the Malmö context. And as a member of the Slottsträdgårdens Vänner, Friends Association, we are now in Slottsträdgården, and Elisabeth and I have an allotment out in the garden where we have been growing for a year. And it started with me wanting to have sort of a meeting point, but of course growing something, but very much being a social place where we could meet and exchange, also to socialize, to have coffee, but also to think about what urban gardening is. So I invited a few friends and colleagues with children, and I thought that this would be a wonderful place to sort of meet and chat about this practice. But I thought that I would say, so that is also the reason and the possibility to being here in the greenhouse, very much thanks to the association and the Slottsträdgårdens Café. But I thought that I would, for you who have not, who are not familiar with the Living Archives project, I thought that I could just sort of tell you a little bit. It's too rich and too complex and too great for me to have a punchline and to make it short. So I'm going to actually just read from what is written on the page, which I guess Susan Cosell, the professor of the project, has written, together with the research team. But I also want to present, before that, Elisabeth, who is part of the, who's my colleague and part of the project, and also Jacek. So the official title of the project is Living Archives, enhancing the role of the public archive by performing memory, open data, and participatory design. The Living Archives project runs until 2007 and is led by Professor Susan Cosell, Malmö University. Living Archives addresses the challenges facing the digitized society through 1, the phenomena of the public cultural heritage archives that increasingly are being digitized, and 2, the practices of archiving that are dramatically being transformed because of network technologies. Researchers in the project see archives as a living social resources, which implies shedding the conception that archives are dormant, disembodied narratives of a dominant culture. The project analyzes and prototypes how digital archives for cultural heritage can become social resources, how they can facilitate social change, create cultural awareness, and collective collaboration. I think it's a fantastic project, and I'm so happy and honored to be part of that. So that is the framework for this series, very much. Tonight's super happy, Bonnie, that you were here and that you could come over from Copenhagen.
Yeah.
And I will give the word to you.
Okay, great. I'm probably going to ask for your help
I will help you.
to support the rest of this, but I just want to say hi. This is a very intimate group. My name is Bonnie Fortune, and thank you so much, Veronica, for having me over. This is a really amazing place, and to be part of the series of other artists that I admire, and like Zenith and Callie prior, and then Cecilia and her group Learning Site later in the session.
And also Gunnar Pettersson.
Oh, okay, great. Nice to meet you. Wonderful. I'm glad you like you. I hope to learn more about your work. This is great. Good. So I moved to Copenhagen in 2010 with my collaborator Brett Bloom, and I'll be talking about our collaborative art practice to kind of contextualize the work that we do together, and then I will talk about a collaborative project we did together, and then two projects I did on my own, which I also see as collaborative as well. So,
would you want some light on?
Well, it depends. I'm fine. Like, you guys, maybe you want light. I don't know if other people want light. What's the general feeling? Do you guys cozy, or do you want more light?
I think camera needs some light.
Well, maybe we still record. No, I mean, Veronica, it's up to you. If you need to turn the lights on for that, we can have light for the presentation, and then we can maybe turn lights off for discussion.
Yeah, that's good.
It's really hard to have that candle. Yeah, that's good. This is the background. Yeah. That's probably good.
But maybe the other one is for the camera, or you move.
Oh, yeah.
On that side, perhaps. Yeah.
Oh, Veronica, can you turn the left side on instead of the right
That
side?
side, for sure. Of course. It's for the side.
Yeah.
I don't care about the camera. Really? Yeah, it's funny. The camera is the most important guest here. And it's funny because I'm trying to give this presentation without a power of like a computer or a projector. Okay, don't worry about the camera. That's funny. We'll start out with that. Okay. So Veronica, come on up here.
I would.
Let's see if we can do it together. Let's see. I don't know. You know what? Let's have another person. Does anybody else would like to come up and be? And then I can talk freely while I'm not holding this. Does anyone else like to be the second person? Great. Molly, that's your name?
Molly.
Molly. Okay, thanks. So, can everyone see? Okay, great. So this is the Powerless PowerPoint. This is the first prototype of what we hope is an ongoing series of, I guess you could call them sculptural objects, and they reflect our desire to make visual representations of what it might look like to power down in our lives and in our art practice. And powering down can mean a lot of things, from using less energy, consuming less, but also reusing materials, making do with materials that you already have, that kind of thing. So this first one I made, as I said, with Brett Bloom, and under the heading of Let's Remake. And we made this, it's about 5 slides, and it's kind of describes our overall ethics of our art practice. So this first slide that you see, it says, "We seek a lower standard of living for a higher quality of life." It's a quote from a book called The Environmental Design Primer, written by Tom Bender in the 70s, and it comes out of actually an archive project that Brett and I ran for many years called the Library of Radiant Optimism for Let's Remake the World. And that library project gathered books from the late 1960s and early 1970s that sort of reflected a how-to aesthetic. And the how-to aesthetic was described in various projects, from how to build your own living structures, which is like a mobile housing system, to how to have your own home birth, to how to start a pirate television station. Many different ideas for how to create social and environmental structures that proposed a different world, right? So this was sort of an inspirational archive that we made, but we found that beyond being inspired by the authors, who are also, many of them were self-publishing, being inspired by those texts, that we would like to then go on to make our own projects. And so we stopped collecting books for the archive in about 2010. All right. Let's see if I'm attached to this microphone. Try to move it.
Åh, det är en geting.
Oj, hjälp.
Oh no. Are you okay?
Vet du det?
Ja. Bee.
Den stack dig.
Nej. Det var den du gömde.
Does anybody have a cigarette? We can put tobacco on it. That would help.
Or headache. Or did it? Hade du då?
Är det okej?
Tänker du?
Ja, det är okej.
Du är den där.
Nej, kan man dra ut det? Det
Är
känns...
det en gav?
Vad håller den?
Ovanför mitt finger där.
Nej, det är ingenting.
Precis där.
Nej, det är inget
Det är
kvar.
inte...
Det är inte
Oh,
där.
you're not
Är det
allergic.
här?
No, okay, good.
Där.
Är det där? Okej, för där är något rött där. Där.
Jag tror inte det.
Det ser ut som att det är något.
Men det är bara... It was really slow, like walking...
I saw he was walking on you.
Yeah, and I felt like on the...
Var kom den ifrån?
But you should have killed it before.
I killed it now.
You killed it now.
It killed itself because that's the end
Det
of
finns
the
Yeah,
sting.
Gud, det finns
If they sting, they die. We know.
So they don't, they won't sting you unless they feel really threatened.
No drama. No drama.
Well, you know, it fits very well with the next slide.
Yeah.
Habitat. We are in a more natural setting here in the greenhouse, so sorry you're in the summer,
Sorry.
the dark side of nature. Okay, well, I'll just keep going. But so the second slide, Habitat, reflects the work that we were trying to do to think about local ecologies. So we were very interested in this idea of how do you connect more deeply to place? How do you understand a place that you live in rather than just passing through it? And you know, we're reading a lot about how you know, some scholars and environmentalists think that knowing a place can take thousands of years, which is obviously not in a single person's lifetime, but more of an idea of a generational understanding of place. And that was also an idea called deep time, which is something that we became very interested in the work that we're doing. So this idea that a practice or an awareness can take place over generations, and that we start to think beyond the kind of temporal, extractive, cultural structures that we have currently. So we started trying to make projects that reflected this idea of local ecologies, knowing a place, or habitat. Habitat is both external as well as internal, so we think of habitat as, you know, this world around us that we move through, as well as our own domestic habitat. So it's a broad term as we're thinking about it. Specifically, it relates to the imagery that you see in the slide is one public project that we did was called the Bat House Project, where we made 7 different rocket box, which is this particular design. Bat houses for a local community in central Illinois. And the bat houses were made with repurposed materials, and they were put up in volunteer locations around the city. And the actual structures were made during community workshops, where we tried to talk about these ideas as well as construct the actual object. And so the bat is a pollinator. It's also a natural pesticide, I guess you could say. I don't know if that's the right word, but it's a pest deterrent. So bats eat such a large amount of insects that might be destructive to agricultural practices. This was particularly relevant to the town that we were in, which was a small city in the middle of an agricultural region of the United States. So the agriculture that is there, it relies heavily on, a petroleum-based structure, chemical, large-scale agriculture. And so thinking about different ways to relate to these practices that form both the economic and social infrastructure of that region. Other ways that we're looking at habitat, different projects that we're doing. Currently we write a web research archive called Mythological Quarter. And we're reflecting about the urban ecology of the Copenhagen neighborhood that we live in. And we're also thinking about material use in our own domestic space so that we can try to use less and use more recycled materials and this type of thing. So those are different ways that we're considering habitat. Thank you. Is this getting too heavy for you guys?
No, not yet.
Good. There's only 3 more slides to go. So I hope it won't get too heavy. We've made a second one of these powerless PowerPoints, but it was absolutely too big to bring this evening. And it was an alphabet-based one focused on the Anthropocene. But there's a lot of pictures online, but I tried to make tonight electricity-free as much as possible. So this particular slide reflects on, again, with this idea of a landscape, but more particularly a region. So when we were living in the Midwestern United States before we moved to Scandinavia, we were working with a group, an extended network of artists, activists, and researchers spread out across this region, which is centrally located, and I don't know if you know this area at all, but it's like Chicago would be one of the main cities, but then it goes, I guess, all the way out to Michigan and Minnesota, and then down to maybe upwards at the top of Kentucky, and then over to Ohio. So I don't know if any of that means anything to you guys, but it's a very large region. Anyway, so we're working with people in this area to think about how the region can be structured on a local level, how it was affected by global capitalism, how it was affected with economic shifts related to the flight of manufacturing jobs, as well as the rise of industrial agriculture, and looking at how that affected social. You guys, please stay. This is. We love having Albertina. Don't leave.
Får jobba med en soundtrack.
Ja,
Kan du ta en bild därifrån bara innan du går? Det blir så svårt. Gör det själv. Tack.
So yeah, much of this region was formerly very economically active, and then with the move of manufacturing to different, under different trade agreements, it's become quite economically depressed, and it's a changing region both socially and environmentally and economically. And so we did a lot of we hosted a lot of gatherings, we hosted a lot of workshops, and then we did a large-scale map making project. And the map making project focused on mapping what we called the corn and coal shed. And so this was with about 11 different artists and researchers. And so the corn and coal shed was this idea of how do we look at the energy infrastructure? So how does one region take power from another region to support itself? And so the corn shed would be industrial agriculture, so corn grown not for food but for ethanol production, and coal coming from other parts of the US but used to power this region, so to speak. So this idea of power plants, like, was a play in words, to be kind of understanding what power structures were shaping this area that we lived in. But it was also in the same time about thinking differently about how we could change power structures.
Sorry,
No.
this is boiling.
Are you so
Making
hot?
a soup.
Oh, the cider.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you need like
No, I'm good. Just taking it down. If anyone wants, please.
It smells good.
It smells
Yeah.
wonderful.
It's like the season. It smells of
Mm.
fall. So this slide is called Social Ecology, and I guess how would you describe this? This is a lot of the discussion in the reading that I've been doing has been moving away from this idea of sustainability to this idea of resilience. So in the environmental context, ecosystems are resilient when they are able to withstand trauma from rising temperatures or erratic weather or sort of industrial traumas like a chemical spill or oil spill. But as they become more managed, so like an industrial agriculture setting, as they become more managed and more dependent on human intervention, or for example, this sort of farming that requires a lot of pesticide use, they're not so resilient. They don't create them, they're not able to withstand these kind of, they become brittle, the word is, that is used to describe this is brittle. So we like to pull the idea of resilience into how we try to think about the artwork that we're doing. And so resilience becomes a model of thinking about how we can create more ethical, more socially resilient, ecological relationships in the work that we're doing. And so a lot of our artwork, I guess some of it has been described recently as social practices, because it's not necessarily based in object making. It's about creating situations from seminars to workshops that are prioritize social relationships over perhaps a typical art practice. We prefer the term social ecology because it's more related to this idea of resilience. And so social ecology is a term that comes from the Green philosopher Murray Bookchin. And it's also used now by environmental scholars in books like The Post-Carbon Reader. And it's focusing on correcting environmental traumas by looking at hierarchical, extractive, and oppressive social structures. But it's also about having, to kind of put it on more direct terms, it's about having intergenerational art events where we have people of all ages. It's about collaborating not just within our peer group, but with people in different fields, just scientists or whatever, researchers. And it's It's about creating spaces that can cross-pollinate and create different, more resilient, stronger discourse around how we might create a different world. So, I'm going to discuss some projects later that reflect a little bit more on what social ecology might mean, and maybe kind of make it a little bit clearer. Okay, so the final slide in the Powerless PowerPoint is archive and publish, and so this kind of forms the backbone of our practice, which, as I told you at the beginning, we started out making this archive of books, the Library of Radiant Optimism for Let's Remake the World, and there are various other archives that we've made, from documenting urban habitat in our neighborhood in Copenhagen. But publishing has always been a way to kind of solidify the kind of temporary autonomous events, projects and discussions that we might have in a more socially based practice. And publishing becomes a way to carry ideas to different regions, to different locations, and to share them in a more long-term fashion. So these serve books and book publishing serves as both the inspiration and documentation of our practice, but it's also a way to spread these ideas. With the Midwest Radical Culture Corridor, we published 2 books with this group of folks called A Call to Farms and Deep Routes, and they were a collection of essays about how to rethink the region. And then more recently, I'm going to talk about in just a minute a book that has been documenting, so it's called An Edge Effect, and it's about art and ecology in this Nordic landscape, and it is, do you want me to hold it up? Yeah, we'll just hold it up just a second. But just wait a second, I'll let you guys rest. But it's been a way for me to kind of transplant these ideas of understanding a region through talking with other people working in this way. And so, just to conclude, I'll read a quote about printing. So, print does have a number of unique characteristics which are yet to be superseded by anything else. The first of these characteristics is the way print uses space. The space taken up by printed materials, whether in the shape of document folders, stacks of printed pages on a table, or a library of shelves filled with books, is real and physical. This is entirely different from something existing only on a screen, since it relates directly to our physical space and to our sensorial perception developed over thousands of years. So it becomes a kind of a spatial practice to then have these more tangible objects that we can hold and that can reflect the social spaces that we also live in. So, thank you for collaborating with me in this brief moment and holding up the sign. And before we can hang it back up here so we can sit down and relax. And that was the Powerless PowerPoint. Elizabeth, do you want some help?
No, I'm fine, thanks.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye-bye. See you.
If somebody wants some more cider,
Yeah.
would you like one? It's very hot.
Okay. Sorry. No, you're fine.
Very, very hot.
So I'll go ahead and pass these out to you guys. You can also take posters later if you'd like.
Good morning. Jessica, do you have some more?
Yeah. have some. I have. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
So I will first talk about two projects that reflect some of the ideas that are part of this PowerPoint, and then I'll conclude with talking about this book, which is coming out soon. So first I'll talk about this one. Yeah, I'm sorry. Can I give you one? Oh. So, in the spirit of trying to, because I knew this was in a greenhouse, to try to kind of keep everything low tech, I'm just going to be showing some actual printed material. This was a project that I did 3 years ago, about 3 years ago, called A Brief Taxonomy of a Lot. Actually, you know what? It might be nicer if you guys held them as I talked about them. So, Veronica, would you mind passing? First we'll do these, and then we'll do the other one.
Okay. This one?
Yeah, this one. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4 people.
You want?
This may be nicer for you to hold them while I talk about them. So this was an experiment in urban ecology. The idea was to try to map this abandoned lot, or what appeared to be an abandoned lot in Copenhagen. And the lot was very near a cultural space called the Factory of Art and Design, and that was one of the reasons it was chosen. It was, so I started out with a hypothesis. The hypothesis was that there's a lot more biodiversity in a city space than we imagine. That hypothesis turned out to be maybe not as true as I thought. But then it also shifted my idea of what biodiversity actually is. So it was a learning process, and what I did was I collaborated with a biologist, an ornithologist, and a botanist to do a qualitative analysis of this particular lot, which is right here. You can see it at the top. It's about this big. It now has an urban gardening project happening there with chickens and raised beds, but when we were there it was empty. But the botanist was able to tell from her taxonomy of the species that it had previously been used for gardening, so edible plants. Showed up in a lot of the species that to the naked eye looked unkempt and wild and completely disorganized, but she's saying like this plant species wouldn't be here unless people had previously used it as a site for gardening. So plants can tell us histories, plants can change the way we relate to a space. And so with these 3 scientists, we went over a couple of weekends, 1 month, and did a species count. So we found this many different plants and this many different birds. And so in my estimate, this was not a lot of biodiversity because I was expecting to see more wildlife, but I also learned a lot about how normally when you're doing a mapping like this, a methodological practice is not so much focused on numbers, but to really reflect biodiversity and ecology, you're going to focus more on time. So doing a count over a longer period of years. You're also going to reflect more on how these particular species might interact with each other, how they affect each other in different periods of the year. So in spring and fall and winter, etc. And also how they react at different times in their life, in birth, death, and etc. In terms of the bird species, the majority were local, but there was 1 migratory species. So in that way, if we did a count at a different time of the year, perhaps we would have seen more migratory species. So,
when was this made?
about 3 years ago.
But when during the year?
Ah, yes, 2011 in the fall,
In the
August
fall.
and September.
August.
Yeah. Yes. And so it really taught me that we have a lot to learn from different disciplinary practices that can really open up our ways of how we view and perceive and relate to a space that we would typically ignore when we're moving through our daily urban travels. I'll just read quickly the Camilla, she's the botanist, her suggestions for increasing biodiversity in Denmark. And I don't know if any of this will ring true for people here in Sweden, but I'm just going to read a reflection on this project. So, Camilla mentioned several things that could be changed or considered to improve biodiversity. They are slow or stop industrial agriculture, especially the environmentally destructive effects of pig farming. Pig farming affects the number of species one might find in an abandoned city lot. In ecology, everything is connected. Number 2, fertilizer and pesticides have a negative effect on the soil, and runoff from farms has far-reaching effects in the landscape. Number 3, water retention in the landscape by using less irrigation for both building and agricultural projects. So she's making a connection that not only can agricultural design be rethought, but also how we create architecture in our city spaces. 4, long-term preservation of the landscape. Asking, and this is also reflective of this idea of deep time that I brought up earlier. Ask, as you're beginning new projects, how will this building, this farm, this road affect biodiversity over time? So you're not just considering the immediate economic gains, but you're also considering what it's doing to the wildlife, the plant life, etc. Number 5, dedicating specific places to be set aside and preserved to cultivate available land for more species diversity to flourish. And number 6, allowing animals to graze farmlands. This is fairly a specific idea. Grazing livestock help control undesirable species in a habitat, such as a meadow or a grassland, and encourage other species to flourish. Their eating habits are part of the overall ecological system. Additionally, people can help with this process by the old-fashioned method of haying or reaping grasses with a scythe. Does everybody know what that is? It's like that long stick with the metal blade at the end. There's actually community groups in Denmark that, I don't know if they have that in Sweden, but they go out in the countryside and they walk in a line and they're chopping the grass in this way. So in some way that I'm not going to be able to specifically tell you because it's a very, yeah, I mean, obviously she's a botanist, she understands better, but it's a more gentle way of,
Yeah.
yeah, there's just a specific word for it, yeah. What was it again? Okay, cool.
What
Yeah.
what was the word?
A scythe in English, but yeah. So it's just a different way of relating to the landscape, but it's also like a more gentle way of developing this relationship, I guess. For me, it's about the relationship. So the way that human beings can relate to this particular landscape with their activities, that it's more gentle than the way we're doing it now. Yeah, so that's this, and you can definitely take this home. And I wanted to bring some of these posters because it's a way to kind of give you more examples of the overview that was talked about in this. Okay. So this one, you want to share?
Yeah.
So this is a front and back poster, and if you so desire, you can take 2 copies because you can cut off the bottom and fold the top half which is this exciting geometric shape. But this I made in collaboration with both Brett Bloom and Ada Bloom, my daughter. And it was a family project about this idea of habitat and household ecology. We made, so Ada came into our lives 2 years ago, and we often talk about how we're creating a domestic environment that is reflective of values that we want her to take into her adult life. And so in the essay on here you can read more about these ideas, but it's we wanted to develop a space where she felt that she could both interact physically, that she wasn't restricted, but she also had a hand in shaping it. And so we helped her to make, I guess you can't really see an image of it on here, but I guess you can. This right here, this is, this is the alphabet tower. It's basically a slide. So she can climb up into here and then slide down this O shape right there. And these are different planchets made with the found materials. As artists, we have a lot of excess material laying around our home. And so she would take some of these up and throw them down the slide. And so in that way we developed the design for these little planchets. So it's a game that you play, you climb in the slide and slide them down. Then they make a nice clattering noise. So I'll just read you some things from this essay. So, in an ecologically and aesthetically impoverished landscape, it is harder for children and adolescents to find a larger meaning and purpose for their lives. Consequently, many children grow up feeling useless in landscapes organized for convenience, commerce, crime, and subsidized by cheap oil. We have little good work for them to do. So a lot of our work, what we try to do is, some of it is directly related to the environment, whether like with the Bat House project or this qualitative analysis of an urban landscape. But other ways, it's more indirectly related to this idea of ecology and how you might build a more resilient or sustainable culture. And I think this would fall under that category of, in our minds, being associated with ecology and ecological thinking, but maybe to an external viewer, it looks a bit different than what you might think of as typical environmental discourse. Domestic space is built on and at the expense of wild space. Everything we own, everything that shapes our daily lives, depends on the earth and its finite resources for its existence. The structures of contemporary life render these connections largely invisible. We don't really know, for example, where our bananas come from when we purchase them at the store. Purchasing something is the primary mode of interacting with the world when you live in a city. Our daily patterns moving us from home to work in the store require few muscles, calories, and very little meaningful engagements with the landscape. The spaces we inhabit are more about the easy flow of goods, money, and people than they are meaningful exchange. We buy a package of bananas, we take it home, eat it, and throw away the plastic wrapping and peels, an isolating set of steps that ignores the wild world that brought the banana to us. And so this goes on to kind of expand on those ideas. But this is just another way that we're incorporating the ideas of habitat, social ecology, into our practice. And please do take these home with you. It's weird when you don't have like a clicker. Like, okay, now we're going to move on to the next topic.
This is wonderful.
So, and thank you for listening on this stuff. I will conclude now with talking about this right here. This has been a 2 years in the making project, and for me, it came out of the research that Brett and I are doing here, but it was also my personal way to connect and kind of map this newly adopted landscape, which is the Nordic landscape. And welcome.
Okay.
Great artist.
Bonnie.
So yeah, so it's a book. I was hoping to bring something to you tonight, but with many things with publishing, everything is slowly delayed. But it should be here in the next week or so to Copenhagen, and then we're going to have a book release event, which you're of course all invited to come over for here. But you can download the PDF already online at this address. And if you don't want to come over to Copenhagen, I'll be happy to mail you a copy. So I'll just read you the table of contents. It includes 2 essays by Sue Spade and Anna Sophie. It includes interviews with artists Camilla Berner, Annie Payson, Nancy Clem, Marie Markman, Niels Norman, Nies Romer, Åsa Sonja's daughter, and interviews with collaborative groups, the Gold Coast Archive, Cultivator, Learning Site, for which we have a member here this evening. Yahoo! My Village's Open Source Food. And it includes 3 case studies of a gathering called Case Puyoki, an exhibition called Skoven in Din Lama, or Forest in Your Pocket, and a community garden project, which the Common Kitchen Garden, but yeah. And a lot of what I do in my own personal art practice is interviews, whether it's sound recordings and doing an interview of a landscape, or interviewing people. So I really enjoy the process of focusing on a dialogue. And so the majority of the book is interview-based. But I've tried to focus on artists in Finland, Norway, Sweden, and some of the essayists talk about Iceland, because I'm coming from this place of trying to think regionally and seeing how these artists who are particularly focused around art, ecology, and the environment, how they're approaching this region. The idea of Nordic is less focused on nationality and more focused on landscape. So all of the artists have done projects here in this region, but they're not necessarily from here. So it's not about nation states, it's about land base. So I'm going to read you the introduction, which is a bit longer than what I've been reading, but I thought it would be a nice way to introduce the book, and then we'll wrap up and have some more cider and questions. So, an introduction to an edge effect, art and ecology in the Nordic landscape. So this is a quote from one of the interviewed artists. The edge effect is this idea that the more edge you create, the more biodiversity you create. Where a meadow meets a forest, or a piece of water meets a meadow, 2 different ecologies meet. 2 different kinds of landscapes meet. And that is where you find the most biodiversity, at the edge. An edge effect, art and ecology in the Nordic landscape, is a collection of interviews, case studies, and 2 original essays by the curators Sue Spade and Anna Sophie. The essays round out what the interviews alone might exclude by referencing the work of relevant artists not included in the interview section. 3 case studies of an exhibition, a gathering to address nuclear power from a cultural perspective, and an artist gardening project are also included, shaping the book's overall structure as a handbook of contemporary environmental art practices. The current economic system plays a significant role in society's relationship to the landscape, a theme that runs through the work of the artists and art groups included here. The necessities of an economy based on continual growth mean that the Earth's global population is consuming the resources of 1.5 planets annually, an unsustainable rate. Åsa Sonja's daughter, a Swedish artist based in Germany, has worked for many years with potato plants, cultivating and growing new varieties. But her artwork touches on more than the humble potato plant. Cultivated plants connect to economy and food safety issues at the core of culture. Human life is intertwined with the lives of plants, she states. My Village's co-founder, Walt Kupinski, says the countryside generally in West Europe has a problem where it went from being a place of production to being very much a consumer space. The landscape is now something that everyone can consume. Anna Sophie Norn, member of the Cold Coast Archive Project, writes that the tension in her work on the far north island of Svalbard lies between an extreme short-term yield orientation economy and the sudden need to restore and save biodiversity for an elusive future. Through their artistic research, fieldwork, and sustained community relationships, the artists and groups profiled here are developing practices that navigate the edge between art, environment, and economy. Whether the projects deal directly with economics, in the case of My Villages, work with agricultural themes in learning sites, House of Economy project, or whether they draw tangential connections like field recordings made by artist Sina Leiden in a former Northern European coal mining town, the ecological themes in their work draw connections to larger social issues. Plants that explain economics, consumer landscapes and interactive art projects that involve the public in creating possible futures, or snippets of the hybrid art practices found here and rooted at the intersection of art and ecology. Eco-homogenization is a problem for biodiversity, exacerbated by the global economic system, especially in the world's oceans, with species constantly being moved around on international trade routes. Global ecosystems are becoming increasingly homogenized. Environmental scientists are concerned about the resultant fragility and lower capacity for resilience of eco-homogeneous landscapes in the face of extreme weather or industrial trauma, such as an oil or chemical spill. Scientists and cultural theorists are connecting climate change concerns with the current dominant economic system of globalized capitalism, an industrial economy based on fossil fuels, global trade, and unregulated markets. In response to this anthropogenic era, some artists are working to develop critical and resilient culture that produces new understandings about how we relate to the landscape. What is the cultural equivalent of biodiversity? The artists and groups here attempt to answer that question in their work, often producing disciplinary overlap. During the course of the interview process, I met with artists who have redesigned urban landscapes with the express concern of increasing biodiversity, whose work addresses seed saving to prevent agricultural disaster and warming climate, who have found aesthetic inspiration in the data recording equipment of plant summits in Greenland, or made plans for urban gardens meant to mitigate a dearth of inner-city green spaces. The environment and associated themes, landscape, plants, natural resources, urban planning, foraging, farming, and gardening are departure points for discussing larger social issues and problems. Since the 1960s, when environmental art first began to gain prominence and recognition, artists have turned toward the environment when dissatisfied with social and political systems. Many artists included here do in fact begin with an overt investment in activist culture, though an explicit activist intent is not necessary for an artwork to be able to produce discourse-shifting effects in relationship to the art and environment. Besides a unifying dissatisfaction with the status quo and work investigating themes of economy and biodiversity, an association with the Nordic land base connects this group of artists. Here, Nordic becomes a loose term and refers to artists who are working or who have worked in this context, though their primary land base may be elsewhere. For many, the Nordic countries signify an advanced approach to environmental issues by, for example, adopting green energy technologies like wind power or promoting cycling over car use. But the artists here represent other aspects of Nordic ecological possibility. Projects like Case Puujoki, a 2-week camp for cultural workers to respond to nuclear power in Finland, organized by Mari Keski Korsu, or Camilla Berner's Black Box Garden, which proposed a reframing of local discussions surrounding public space use, urban planning, and plant species diversity in Copenhagen, are creating what some are calling discourse diversity. That is, hybrid cultural work mingling art, science, public interaction, and various other threads. In his short essay, The Three Ecologies, Felix Guattari refers to hybrid awareness, combining sensitivity for mental, social, and environmental tendencies in order to reorient ourselves toward the landscape and create a new ecologic, a social perspective that can resist the alienation of capitalism by creating biodiverse perspectives. Several artists and essayists in this book cite his essay as a foundational text for thinking about ecology and art. The numerous citations attributed to the text point both to the relevance and conversely to the fact that more writing on the intersection of art and ecology and society needs to be generated. His essay has proven attractive to a cultural audience because he acknowledges the role of the artist in this process of reorienting and reconstructing, and he disparages the niche naturalist lost in the elite green culture, urging for a broader definition of ecological thinking. If climate change is not, as some have suggested, an issue whether the Earth will survive, but rather if humans will survive, then Guattari's reconstruction of a more humane and socially centered rather than techno-capitalist centered ecological value system is indeed relevant. Many projects included in this book, from Nice Romer's Plant Nursery to Right to Farm the Land by the artist group Cultivator, gently blend ecological elements with more socially engaged intentions, including helping elderly people find a social network, or helping asylum seekers to Sweden gain access to community garden plots. Michaela Kriven, independent curator, and former head of the arts for RSA Ecology Center, has noted that she is shifting her research in art and ecology towards human rights, conflict, and migration, the tough end of climate change, alluding to the urgent social needs associated with environmental issues. Interviewees Open Source Food and Yanni and Kaysen both connect ecological themes and environmental activism in their artwork to larger discussions of the boundaries of nations, militarism, and who has access to particular landscapes. The artist group Open Source Food worked closely with traumatized asylum seekers in a Danish asylum center to identify edible plants in the vicinity of the facility and to connect asylum seekers with nutrition experts. Kaysen documented the struggles of environmental and political activists against the construction of a United States military base on the South Korean island of Jeju. Artist Eric Berger, acting head of the Finnish BioArt Society, discusses his work connecting scientists with artists for cross-disciplinary exhibitions, critiquing, for example, geoengineering tactics as a solution to climate change. These artists are above all responding to the rapid changes that are occurring in our anthropogenic era. To build a resilient planet, one that is biodiverse and can withstand trauma, requires a broad mix of approaches, expanded and robust relationships. The artists and groups here are connected to a multitude of publics beyond the art world. Climate scientists, seed bank engineers, farmers, urban planners, architects, economists, professional foragers, and they approach their subjects with differing perspectives, from the practical urban planning solution to the poetic, like field reportings of weather patterns to hear an unpredictable future. Prior artistic generations have approached the landscape as a source of inspiration and awe, or as an opportunity to create the facsimile of a cultural or picturesque ideal. Whether the artist is working with urban gardens and edible plants, or with anti-nuclear activism, or the sounds of collapsing cities left behind by the coal industry, this book is a collection of approaches and possibilities for what life in the Anthropocene might be like and what can be done to shift us to other futures. Thanks for listening to that. So that kind of gives you an overview of what the book is about, and I hope some of you will be interested in reading the whole thing. And we actually have the hard copies. So thank you so much.
Did you say how long did it take you to work on that?
About 2 years, yeah.
About 2 years. Oh.
Yeah. So the interviews were conducted all last year, traveling around and also via Skype. So, but yeah, it took a while to put together the editing process is definitely.
But I didn't understand the exhibitions. Like they sort of commissioned was within the project. Was there like productions that arise from the initiative of the book, or
No, they were.
They're all
the
existing.
community garden started beforehand.
Right.
The exhibition Forest in Your Pocket happened during, as well as the Case Puyoki retreat. It happened during the process of making the book.
But there were no commissions sort of from the book project as a.
No,
as a commission
No.
to
make something
to
specific
make
for the
something.
book.
Yeah.
No.
No.
No. The book serves as a document of things
Right.
that happened before, during, and
Yeah.
that will happen afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Bonnie, for such a
Thank you.
wonderful presentation.
certainly.
It's so lovely to
Whole things.
paper and our own slides.
Do you guys have any questions, or were you confused by anything, or everything clear? I know you came in.
I came too late.
Let me introduce Åsa Lyckafalk, for you who don't know. Åsa is...
I know some here.
Yeah. Åsa is also an artist.
Yeah.
The operator, Raketa.
It's a free-flying, free-falling institute.
Yeah, oh, cool.
Yeah.
That's a good name.
Very much free-falling at the moment.
Flew into Malmö without a notice.
Yeah, I was in Blekinge and I thought it was very close by, but it was so.
Yeah.
I have a question. Now I was too late, but the examples were the artists from the south of Scandinavia, or was it from also the north? Or geographically, where were they?
It's just all over. Like, some artists are from Norway. The Cold Coast Archive project focused very specifically on Svalbard.
Okay.
North of Tromsø.
Yeah, it's way up there.
Yeah.
I've never been there. Have you guys?
You
been?
didn't go?
No, I haven't. Not there. No, the project's over.
Oh, of course.
They're not there anymore.
Uh-huh.
So it's like, yeah, it's another archive project. They have a beautiful online archive. Actually, you can go and kind of sift through them. They made a lot of video and sound recordings, and so it's kind of tangentially connected. But obviously a lot in this region, because this is where I am, but also, yeah, all over north in Finland as well. So, and the Finnish Bioart Society, they're based way up in the north of Finland. So, yeah, just really all over the region.
I just came back from a trip north Russia, and
Okay,
I saw
yeah.
some great
Yeah,
examples of work there as well.
cool. What did you see?
Ooh, an artist educated in St. Petersburg and moved back to a small village in Arkhangelsk Oblast, and living and acting in his old family house out in the somewhere, nowhere.
Yeah.
On his own only, so
Yeah, on his own, yeah. And it was fantastic,
Wow.
really. And then he is, of course, traveling and taking part of some
Yeah.
seminars and meetings, but he's really living there and trying to do it.
So, like, you mean growing food? Or?
Yeah. Making experience with the animals and
Oh, wow.
plants and...
Yeah.
is it like completely isolated, cut off from civilization?
It's a very small
Yeah.
village, just a couple of houses.
Yeah.
And I think it's a fantastic example. It's close by, but we don't know that much about
Yeah.
Russia.
Yeah, it's true.
But it's really close
It seems like a completely other world, doesn't it? Yeah.
by. Yeah.
It's kind of isolated.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Or someone else want to go? I was wondering, Bonnie, like how, like since these 5 years in Scandinavia,
Mhm.
just curious about how and if you see that this local context, how that has shaped practice and your work.
Well, I mean, that's a good question. I feel like practice is already kind of being shaped by this area because of previous relationships maybe that we had before we came here. Definitely I've been inspired by the work of like Learning Site and prior collaboration, the collaboration that Cecilia and Reiki were in before Learning Site. I think being here, well, just in making this book, this was a learning experience for different ways that we could think about relating to the environment. And I think a lot of these artists are I'm not sure. I felt I think the thing that I learned most was this idea of connecting multiple threads. So like it's not just artwork about the plants, to kind of quote Cecilia actually, but it's about all these different ways that the plant reflects and relates to the world through political issues, through global economic issues, and so really kind of opening up a discourse beyond just an art and environment idea. So in that way, I guess I learned a lot from being in this conversation.
But you mean
But at
that
the same time, I would just want to say, just at the same time, I think there's what I tried to do with this book was there's several artists reflected in there that work elsewhere. They're maybe in dialogue, so it's more than just a regional discussion. It's a broader discussion because people, it's like for example, Nancy Clem, who came here and worked closely with Learning Site, she is based in Chicago, which is where I came from. So maybe these ideas are transcending a region, so to speak. Yeah. What you were going to say?
No. No, I was thinking. Yeah. No, I don't know. I was probably also relating to sort of having families and children. And I was also curious about, of course, social practice. Like how you maybe, how you see that, how or has that, being informed by the discourse and the possibilities here maybe that are perhaps different from the States. I mean, I was repeating myself, but I'm just curious.
Well, I mean, for me, that's a different discussion. That's a discussion of like feminist issues. But I think that being here, in terms of like my own personal ability to work as like artist with children, it's definitely been. There's different modes of working here. It's more acceptable. It's more possible. There's a lot of issues. A lot of activism has to happen in the United States around the role of being an artist with children. But I'm not. Is that kind of what you're getting at? Yeah. When you talk about family,
Well, yeah.
is that what you mean, or what are you kind of getting at? Are you getting at more this idea of like domestic ecology, or?
Yeah, maybe that, like how that would. Just wondering what has. I mean, of course, I'm just thinking about myself. Of course, we are inspired in different ways, but we also emphasize, the culture that we originate from. We might sometimes emphasize them more when we, are put into a different local context. And then I just wonder, sort of, or we start to question ourselves, I think, in a new light, and then that what comes out from that. I'm just speaking about myself. What comes out of that is for me clearly like, but also I think it's when one shifts local context, you also see yourself, of course, in different situations, but also those local contexts have different possibilities, but also different needs, or you recognize different needs. And then what does that do to what inspires you to act on. And maybe that was my question. Sort of what have you, but I guess you have this question.
Yeah. I mean,
Different economies, different, social realities. So,
yeah.
so just sort of thinking what maybe, can you recognize what sort of sparks you here?
Yeah,
Is that a possible question?
it is a question. It's definitely, it's a broad question.
Yeah.
I mean,
Maybe it's
but
not
I
different.
mean, I feel like, well, yeah. I guess, I think it's a long response that I could give, but a short response would be, for me, making this book project, for example, was a way for me to kind of, by talking with other artists and asking them specifically about how they related to the region here, what types of practices they used, what they valued in terms of their philosophy of working, was a way to kind of quickly orient myself in this area. So much of my practice before moving to Scandinavia was about local relationships, local politics, local economic, environmental needs. That's one way that maybe this region has, that I've specifically focused on that. In other ways, I still work collaboratively. I still work with artists that have very similar practices that aren't necessarily that different from what we worked with before. And so in that way, things maybe haven't changed. But yeah. Also, I was never a parent in the United States. I've only ever been a parent in Scandinavia. So in that way, the domestic ecology is a really new thing that I wouldn't say is so much shaped by here, but just shaped by different place in my life. So yeah, maybe that answers your question.
Can I ask you something?
Yeah.
I'm just thinking that, we observe this intensification of interest in sustainable activities, local activities, and so on. And I'm just wondering how much it is actually a result of a political situation of today, and how much it might remain. Like, imagine that the political situation change. Do you think it would affect also the growth or the exponential even growth of these practices? Will they stop? I'm thinking now, for instance, about like certain moments in the history of the 20th century, like in the UK, for instance, during the war, there was a sudden intensification of kind of local activities, sustainable, we can call them, activities of people starting growing their own stuff, obviously because of the crisis or because of the war, or building their own furniture. And we see this kind of...
World War II, or?
That was, 1940.
Okay, yeah.
So people were basically like, redesigning their interiors, even like cutting off the needs, so to speak. But then, of course, it ended with the war. And I'm just wondering how temporary this tendency nowadays, for instance, is, and how much it is dependent on the current political situation.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. It would be my personal desire that somehow the cultural field could offer models or suggestions for ways to create a paradigm shift so that we can take these more sustainable or resilient practices to create a different way of relating to the landscape, create different economic models. But yeah, I don't know, because we're sort of in the middle of it, to see how long it would last. But yeah, I think that's a great thing to think about. I think Cecilia would also have a lot to say on that. She talked about it quite a bit in her interview, just like, for example, how environmental art practices have changed even since the 90s, the very recent past, not even the 1940s. Just how someone working in urban gardening, for example, which is Veronica's research, how that to work as an artist in urban gardening issues the meaning of that has completely shifted
Yeah.
from then to today. So I don't have a good concrete answer for you, but I definitely am considering that
Right.
as well.
Because I think the only communities that for me seem like, you know, carrying on this kind of way of thinking about things are like communities that are actually apolitical, so to speak. Like, I have friends who live the rural type of life for years, for instance, and they don't really care about, you know, the political situation, but they just, you know, they were growing up in such a way, and but for them it's natural to, it's not dictated kind of by the situation. Like what Veronica was also talking a little bit about the family, like you know, you kind of inherit it also through like family connections or.
Have you ever tried to talk to them about like your friends, or does the issues of politics ever come up? Or
Yeah, I mean, in some cases, it seems like, you know, they really want to. There's this one friend who was growing up, you know, in a village in Italy, for instance. For him, it's so normal, and actually, he's getting sometimes pissed off about, you know, these artists who are kind of, you know, scavenging on this idea of, you know, sustainable lifestyle or something like that, you know, because it's topical and because you can get a grant for it, you know.
Right, sure.
Yeah, just a thought.
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks for your input. Any other?
Malin, I mean, you probably have a great answer to that. I mean, you're the local
Or
pro, I
about,
would say.
or about urban
Urban
gardening.
gardening,
I think, you know, if you see it like a trend or something, but I think it's a lot of things happening in the urban gardening. It's both a social movement in a way, but it's also a lot about knowledge production. People, I mean, the most extreme story I've heard is a child telling her mother, why have they put up these apples in the trees? And it's, I mean, we have gone so far away from nature in a way.
Yeah.
And I don't think that is a trend. It's something that we have to work a little bit more than 2 years to get back to in a way. And it wouldn't change in 5 years either, that we need food to eat and how it grows and how it's, I mean, produced in a way. So I think it's also both to connect to something that we have lost in a way, rather quickly, and also to find new ways, to develop it further.
Yeah.
How to grow and how to connect to a more. Yeah, I think we have to also, like you said, like it's a paradigm shift that in a way needs to come. Why should capitalism be the one and only thing that's forever on? I mean, it's need another kind of thinking, and then I think these kind of movements with the environmental thing and the gardening and so it's part of that shift of thinking.
But I have a question regarding that. You were at that meeting, weren't you? The Malmö Stads vision and sort of creating. No, I went to a meeting. Malmö city is very sort of progressive, I guess, with developing, facilitating urban gardening for citizens living in the city, and we were a group invited to be part of listening to a new. They have chosen to create not a platform, but to create a förening, an association for individuals and organizations. And it's not the network that already exists, but this is a new thing coming with an initiative from the municipality. And I was sitting in that meeting and I was wondering, this, of course, it's rising, it's happening, and it's very hip as part of becoming a lifestyle, but it's also, of course, a necessity for survival in some parts of the world. But when it comes to the municipalities in this part of the world, I'm wondering how much of an economic interest it actually is. Is it, I mean, not only marketing, but like capitalism must be there, I believe, because That's just my hypothesis, and I
It's,
don't have
it's
grounds for
different
it.
ways. I think it's the double. In
Yeah.
some way, I think about. I've been working also as a gardener,
Yeah.
and it's not so much money put on maintenance in the city. It's very expensive, and in some way, you should be critical to this, letting the citizens be participating and taking care of the public space in a way and music learning. It's cheap for the city because the citizens do it themselves. Yeah, in some way. But on the other way, you can say that it's also a big part of the urban gardening that you use the public space in different ways and that it's not commercial with the growing. That is, and also that you're talking about participate and also a social thing to do something in the public space, meet people, non-digital
Yeah.
in a way. It's important part, I think, of the urban gardening movement. Also with that.
There was something also with Malmö City that I thought was a bit odd, was that they also said that in another seminar I was joining on the lecture when they were talking about this, is that you can do anything in Malmö that you want. You can have animals, whatever, but you're not allowed to do it hidden, so to say. You have to be, checked by the municipality. I was thinking on the lecture that you had, the first one where I was there, how there were many people that were forced to do hidden gardening.
Right.
And this is banned. If you're gonna read the logic of Malmö City, it's like criminal. They can take you down if you're down. Yeah. You're not allowed to farm here if you don't have a license to do it.
Does that cost money to get a license, or do you?
No, I think you can just go there.
Just
They just
apply
want to
for
have control, I think.
Yeah.
But I guess that this.
So I was just thinking, there's something about the control and land. Sorry.
No, but then this förening, this new association that is, of course, an initiative from the city municipality with the rhetorics of actually facilitating, no? But it's also, of course, my interpretation, it's a way of controlling. But I also wonder if it is, I'm sort of having Gothenburg back of my head, having sort of these like prototypes within a city, which becomes I have understood, that becomes models for and concepts that can be sold. Have you heard about this?
Stadsjord or no?
Huh?
Är det stadsjord eller vad?
Nej, alltså det är mer... well,
Like a creative concept, like a brand.
exactly. So within the city you have different models. The green city, the business city, and then you can... And then they sell those concepts. I understand.
The cities
to other cities.
To other cities, or to international interests. And it's just a question that I have been thinking a lot about, like the urban gardening, as much as it is beautiful and
Just den här föreningen, was that was Malmö stad?
Yeah,
that's
Malmö
Malmö
stad. Okay.
in order to facilitate, make it easier to
Just det.
What was the idea behind the organization? Why
Well,
an organization? Why not
What is
only a
their interest?
network? I mean,
the interest of the
yes, from the
association.
city,
Why
from the city.
No, but they want to make it easier for people to grow.
But why?
Yeah, I also.
Yeah, why?
What makes it easier because it's an organization and not a network? How?
Well, I mean, I can.
What did they say
Yeah.
at the meeting?
We switched. No, but it was not. I mean, I can have a conspiracy theory about this. I think that it's wonderful what the Malmö Stad is doing, of course. But what I heard when I was in this meeting, or the explanation that I got, one doesn't want to use the term platform, because platform is too loose, whereas förening in Swedish association would be more of a kind of rooted,
formal structure.
a formal structure,
One
which is what
facility.
they identify as is needed, as any other field. That just because this is urban gardening doesn't mean that it should be lose.
But it's a little bit strange that the initiative is coming from the municipality and not from people, not from the inhabitants.
I don't think it's strange.
In a way.
Because it's, if you look at the vision of Malmö, it's about how to use the public space for the inhabitants and how to make it easy for them to meet. And urban gardening is one thing, and maybe it's just for 2 years.
But I
I'm
have
sorry,
no- yeah,
because
it's over
I'm
2
a
years.
little bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
No,
Yeah.
this is for, I mean, this is, but it was very good. Like, it was, there were many things in there that sounded, for example, creating an association which is not a program, right? Like a sheet of solutions for how it should look for 20 years. But and they emphasized the, sorry, Molly, now we're coming off track. But
It's very interesting. It is interesting how these practices are deployed in municipalities. Like, this is something.
just to end that
Yeah.
sentence, it was they emphasized within creating this förening and like the program of it is that it's rörlig or följsam is the Swedish word, which is well, I don't know what that would be.
Flexible and
Follow. It's supposed to follow development,
Okay.
right?
It's constantly adjusting to
Yeah.
the movement.
flexible.
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 I guess.
Mm.
Kind of flexible. Följsam is you follow some. No.
No.
I think I get the idea.
You get it. So that was good. If there were good parts of it, of course. I just have a question: what is?
But isn't that
Thinking
part of
about
the discussion too? That some people have had if the planet is in a crisis, being the human beings, people are discussing if it should be political, and this is political now. If the city is acting. I mean, yes, I'm just. This is what people have been talking a lot about, and this is how it looks like, or how should we do it, or if it's political and not solved by individual initiatives, or because this is a little bit what you talk about. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
So there is some
Yeah.
kind of a.
No, I don't believe individual initiatives can solve the global.
I have a
crisis.
question to you. What is your experience? Do you have experience, and what is your experience here during these years of artist relationship or closeness to politics within urban development, for example?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, just based on this research, obviously different artists have different relationships. I feel like in certain circles, specifically so I'm based in Copenhagen, so typically politics, I found it can be sort of avoided. Sometimes it's a bit of a negative. Not for all artists, and definitely not for the ones that I'm focusing on in this book and interested in, but it just is some arts communities feel that politics can sort of take away from the art making. But yeah. What was the second part of that question?
I guess my question: do you feel that artists are participating in making politics?
In what way do you mean, like actually, like posing political questions with their artwork? Yes. some
Well,
of
yes,
them
of
do.
course. Yeah, but can they reach beyond that? Can they?
Okay,
Yeah.
that's a
Do
different
they-
question. Yeah, yeah.
Do you
Can-
feel that? Do you?
I think that's
Reason.
that's a broader question for arts in general, right? You mean can arts
Here.
approach or only
I mean, this part of Scandinavia feels like.
can artists affect politics?
Are they part of making politics? Do you say?
I think several of the artists that I focused on here aspire to be. Yeah. I think that, for example, open source food. They're actively critical of the asylum system. Camilla Werner is actively critical of the city planning. And then of course,
But are their actions actually listened to by the authorities in some way, or taken into consideration in some?
I don't know. It's complicated, yeah. It's like anything. It's like it's a conversation. I think. I mean, if you want me to point to like actual like this policy got changed because of the work that artists did.
No.
Like,
No. Of
But
course,
I-
you can't measure it like
Yeah,
that.
you can measure it like that. I mean, I think that I guess one wonderful thing of being,
yeah.
I feel, being here is that
Yeah.
you can take the phone and you can reach that politician. You can, you
Yeah.
know, that you have, I have, the
Yeah.
feeling of being close.
Are you talking about the farming in the city now? Because that was not the case 15 years ago.
No, I'm not
20 years
talking.
ago at all, that you could just call the municipality.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, great, you can farm over there.
So I mean, would you say
I would say it was not like that in Malmö.
Yeah.
would you say cultural
Good
work?
that you've been more involved in these things, but I mean, I think you have a better perspective on it, but I would argue that you couldn't just, this is an interest that is changed in
Yeah.
the municipality, I think, right now.
I'm not only talking about farming, but we can talk the
Oh,
first
you
so-
mean like
but
economic
maybe city
example.
development.
Yeah.
Well, an example, for me, a wonderful example is, again, I tend to repeat that, but Amy Franceschini and the Victory Garden project in San Francisco, where artists are also on board on municipality level to advise and to actually create, you know, manifestations that are part of the city
Yeah.
and in collaboration with the city. It's not through Malmö Museum or, you know, like
No.
in a gesture somewhere that
Yeah.
will be announced on the culture pages. So that sort of, but maybe, yeah, that artists are on the level of actually speaking directly within that forum. But from that there, I don't see that happening really here. But as a citizen of Sweden and Malmö, I do feel close to politics and politicians in the way that I can call someone. I can reach someone if I want to talk to that
Sure.
person.
Yeah, well, I mean, another example from the book, like in that vein, is he's Niels Norman. He teaches at the Art Academy in Copenhagen. He's worked with city planners and urban developers to make a large-scale permacultural-based urban design project in Roskilde, Denmark. So, I mean, yes, it happens. And a lot of what he talks about in his interview is this idea that there has been some criticism in the art world that artists might be used by municipalities as sort of like a greenwashing, perhaps, but that he sees it as an opportunity for artists to come in and actively sort of intervene in this kind of situation. So I think there's a lot of conflicting perspectives. Yeah. So yes, it does happen, but maybe not to the extent that we would want it to happen.
I mean, in Stockholm, for instance, I know several examples of projects that have been developed completely aside from the political kind of apparatus that were commenting on the politics of the city, and they were submitted to the city as a suggestion that maybe it can be taken into consideration. But they were always treated. Apparently, they have drawers with like, projects and art, and whatever they consider non-serious, they would throw to the art thing, and like, oh, it's just it's just a comment, it's a commentary. We don't really take it serious. Yeah, exactly, inspiration. Yeah. And then the different thing is that the city they have some budget for commissioning works, and then they are completely politically stirred. But there is no like middle ground kind of. You're either out or you're in.
Yeah.
That's at least from my kind of perspective.
But that's what I think is interesting, the farming in the city or urban gardening, what you call it, because it's not from the the governmental
Yeah.
level that it started. It started from the ground away, and if you want to be part and do something as an artist, I mean, it's the opportunity to act between these institutions, both the art institutions and the political world and so on.
Yeah.
And I think it's, if you talk about Stockholm, it's rather late, the urban garden in Stockholm. Both Malmö and Gothenburg is coming much far. And I can see that was starting a network in Stockholm. And I also, as an artist, like to work over disciplines, that is other gardeners and landscape architects and just people is interesting, because that makes me point out more what I, as an artist, what's my point in this, what I'm doing. So, but then I think it's a pressure on the politicians that they need to listen to this movement in a way. So I think it's, now I feel that way, it's just a ground to do and develop it further, because it's just the beginning. And maybe it's a lot of people that think it's so nice to put a seed in the soil and grow for a year, and they will just go away. But it depends on what you want to do and involved in it, that you want, what you want to develop from it. So some things will just, with this pallkragar, it's a lot of more things you can do than pallkragar. I think.
Yeah, I spoke to some activists. That's slightly different subject, but I'm working on a project around Slussen in Stockholm, like trying to get to know what's going on there. Yeah, I mean they're demolishing it, and there are movements that are trying to defend this place. It's like a kind of key, crucial, architectural communication hub in Stockholm, and talking, because you mentioned that politicians have to start listening to people, and some of these activists were telling me that it's an interesting political situation now in Sweden, because there is no true majority in the government, and they said that it's actually very, very good situation for kind of minor movements, because they have to be listened, because when there's no clear majority, the authority has to turn back to people, because otherwise, they will not. That's at least what they're saying. On a local level, it's quite the same, So they have to start listening to people in order to gain their support. Because if there was like a strong majority, they would just, they wouldn't have to listen to people. So I found it quite interesting that this shaky political situation actually creates space for
other things.
Yeah, maybe not.
Yeah, for other things too, of course. No, that's a different story. Yeah.
But you want to say something?
I just had an example from yesterday. I attended a meeting about Norra Sorgenfri. It's a part of Malmö, which is poisoned and difficult to. But they will get rid of it this year. But the city want to make something out of it, and I think they started 2011, and involving artists and everything, and still nothing happened. And they're very sad about this themselves. And it's the thing is that there is about 250 artists or people involved in creative field in this area. 250.
In Norra
Sorgenfri, because there are cheap places to rent. And the difficult thing, and the city planner really want to keep this power that the artists have in this area, and they don't want to make it like it used to be. The rent is getting up and so on, and the artists move. But for in 2011, 12, 13, they have in a way used the artists to create different activities to make it the place interesting. But now they don't have the tool to get back to the artist and listen. I think the listening thing is very difficult. in this meeting, I think there came up like 50 new ideas about we go to Copenhagen and look at this very interesting architect that make this project, and we do this and we do this. Instead of going back, now it's time to pay back to these artists that already invested so much energy.
I have another opinion, actually, on that, because I think that in that area now, in this, so to speak, poison area, there is about 200 EU migrants right now, Romani people, and this is the only place where they can be. And this discussion about the problems of the artist raising the value of the land, it's not that the artist will not be able to be there, it's that these people won't be able to be there. It's the general problem of
That's another level.
gentrification that artists are involved in.
Yeah.
And I think that is sort of symptomatic of how artists are entangled in the general economy. So I don't think if you want to actually change things rapidly that you should go through art. Art has another value, of course, but it's not like explicitly political as other activities can be, in my opinion.
That's interesting. Nobody talked about these people.
But this, because there were a camp that was homeless people, I think. But they were gone because they made a sound installation there, I think. And these people are coming now. The EU. When did they arrive? The EU.
Some of them came this summer, and
it's quite.
But they
recent.
live in
Nova Soja in tents.
in tents.
But because a common friend made an art piece there, and then suddenly when she returned to show the art piece, it was gone. Yeah.
She would dig the hole and she looked for
Because there was a whole home there, a city there, or a place there.
How many people are living there? Did you say?
Well, it's like between 50 and 150, I think.
Wow.
Did you know, maybe, I mean, but this is another question, but like do we talk about tent cities when it comes to this group of people that are immigrating and sort of creating a life?
What do they call it? A rural container cities.
They're content cities, people.
Is it tent cities as well?
I mean, it's really what it is, no?
Yeah, it was a program. Was a program on the radio about that.
Yeah.
If we should start to rethink the social problems in Sweden in terms of how we picture other countries that we consider poor or whatever. Because now, actually, these places occur all over Sweden also. So, but my point was that, like, I think it's a little bit complicated to.
But Gunnar, I think what you said was also like if the market would say rule that area, it would already be built away. There would be no way of.
But are you sure? Because it's the community.
What I meant was that instead of getting far away and get new inspiration, you have to go back. You have to stick to the place, and of course, if there now is some people living in tent, you have to reconsider the situation.
But for the politicians to look at the site rather than going.
Fun.
Who?
I mean, it's not the politicians; it's the city developer.
Yeah.
The politicians.
I mean, that's what
they are in a way a step away.
Yeah. But the city.
But don't you think that it took so long time to do it because it's ever so expensive? It is.
No, I think it's
with poison ground.
Yeah, that's
it's
one thing.
It's ever so expensive, and there are also many different methods.
Yeah, but I know it's also the city, the difficulties to work together within the cities, because it's not communication between the different.
But just that topic I know about that it's so expensive and it's so complicated, and there are so many methods.
But they are solving it now, so.
They are more effective.
But for me,
We wrap up.
Yeah.
What time is it?
It's 7.
It's just 7?
It's 7.
Okay, yeah, okay.
Good timing.
Great. But this is a great discussion, but maybe we could do it less once so I don't have to like sit here.
Yes.
I would like to stay and talk with you guys, but I feel like I'd like to move around as well.
Yeah,
Maybe-
of course,
yes,
of
yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all so much. Yeah, I really love your comments.
And looking forward to that.
Yeah, please, yeah, do.